to the next inspirational moment, namely the keynote speech from Dr. Amollo Ambole. She is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi in Kenya, and together with Karina Fassbender, who is also here with us today, they're setting up the first sugar project at the University of Nairobi. So I'll directly invite Dr. Amollo Ambole to join us here and introduce us to her topic on co-designing with lower-income communities.
Thank you. Greetings. It's an honor and great pleasure for me to join you today as a keynote speaker at this global kickoff. During the breakout room, I had no clue what was happening, but I heard that people were sharing about where they're from. So let me start by sharing something about Kenya. It's a beautiful country in the eastern part of Africa. And one of the most beautiful things about it is that we speak over 40 languages. Of those languages, Swahili happens to be one of the most common. And so to start us off, I'd just like to teach you a few words of Swahili. So the common greeting in Swahili is habari, which means how are you? And you would reply mzuri, which means I'm well. So when I say habari, you say mzuri. Habari?
Mzuri.
Mzuri. Mzuri. Habari?
Mzuri.
Great. But if you're a foreigner in Kenya, people choose the easier version, which is just to say jambo. So when I say jambo, you just say jambo. Jambo.
Jambo.
Yeah, so from films, you've probably heard of a few other Swahili terms such as Hakuna Matata, and Hakuna Matata means we have no problems whatsoever in Kenya. And you may have also heard of Karibu, and Karibu means welcome. And with that, I'd like to welcome you to my talk today on co-designing for extreme affordability. So let me see if I can share my screen right now. There you go. So as I was introduced, I'm a lecturer and design researcher here at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. As you may well know, Kenya, like many other African countries, is a middle to low income economy. And that means that most people are either living just at the poverty line or below it. So the expression Hakuna Matata is not actually true. We do have a lot of matatas that we need to solve as designers. The projection is that African cities are going to double their populations in the year 2050. That means that a city like Nairobi, which currently has 5 million residents, is going to have 10 million residents in just 30 years. And so the big question is, how do we co-design for such a burgeoning of population within a short time and also while using limited resources? For me, these are the issues that keep me up at night as a design researcher in Africa. And therefore, I've made it my mission to empower local communities to co-design their own sustainable future. And the belief I have is that those people who experience the problem from the inside and on a daily basis are the ones who are best placed to design solutions to that problem. And so with that mindset, I've been lucky to collaborate with colleagues in several projects. And today I just want to give examples from 3 projects that I have been lucky enough to lead. And from that, hopefully we are going to open up a conversation about how we can co-design for extreme affordability. The first project I want to talk about is known as CODEC, and CODEC stands for Co-Designing Energy Communities. So this is a collaboration that we undertook between the year 2017 and 2019. And it was a collaboration between the University of Nairobi, where I'm based, Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, and Stellenbosch University in South Africa. As an interdisciplinary group of researchers, our aim was to understand and provide solutions to the energy poverty challenge in African cities. And to do that, we use a place-based approach of working in informal settlements in our own cities. So here in Nairobi, we are working in Mathare Informal Settlement. Our colleagues in Kampala are working in Kasubikawala Informal Settlement. And in South Africa, we worked in Nkanini Informal Settlement. So an informal settlement, as you may know, is an area in the city that is not well planned. So it's often considered a slum or what you would call a favela. And the people living in these settlements lack adequate access to basic services that you and I enjoy on a daily basis. So there is poor access to water and sanitation, energy that people need for cooking, heating, and lighting their homes. They have poor access to healthcare, education, and other social amenities. So for us as researchers, we were very concerned about how we understand the household energy problem in these informal settlements, but of course connected to all the other challenges that people face in the settlement. This image is an artistic impression by one of my students of the informal settlement here in Nairobi, that is Mathare. So we found that when people don't have access to adequate services such as the household energy they need, then they resort to other means. So in Mathare, it's very common for people to use charcoal or firewood. And if you can see the shacks there, they burn this in enclosed spaces, and that produces indoor air pollution. And that pollution has adverse health effects on women, especially because they're the ones who do most of the cooking. For those people who are not using charcoal or firewood, or in some cases, in addition to using charcoal and firewood, they have these illegal connections to the grid. So the government, of course, considers this electrical wiring as illegal connections because they are not collecting revenue from residents who are actually enjoying the service of unlimited electricity supply in their homes. But for us as researchers, we looked on this as informal connections or transgressive practices of people who are providing for themselves a basic human right. So it's a basic human right for everybody in the city to have access to modern, safe energy services. And this is basically what people are providing for themselves in Mathare. So if you're living in this settlement, someone in the settlement who is a self-styled electrician would charge you a minimum fee of about $3 a month, and that will get you connected to the electricity grid. So you'll be able to use as much electricity as you want for just $3. On average, someone else in Nairobi would be paying up to $30 or $40 for the same service. So as you can imagine, this is extremely affordable if you're coming from a low-income community such as Mathare. So in this regard, people refer to this type of connections as Sambaza electricity. And Sambaza means to share. So for the people in Mathare, they're just basically sharing a service that everybody else has access to in the city. In Kasubikawala in Kampala, they have very similar connections, and there they call them Kamyufu. And Kamyufu in Luganda means the color red, and that refers to the dangerous activity of connecting yourself to the grid. So because it's considered illegal, you can get arrested and charged, but people still do it because, as I said, they are accessing a basic human right. In South Africa, in Nkanini, the illegal connections are referred to as izinyokanyoka. And this is Xhosa language, and it refers to snakes. It means snakes. So as you can see, the wiring is all over the place, and it does look like snakes crisscrossing the settlement. So what we learned as researchers from these izinyokanyokas, sambazas, and kamyufus is that we have to rethink about affordability. So 3 very important lessons for us was that the first one was that you can't impose technology solutions on people who out of necessity have to find the cheapest alternative. Secondly, we also found out that the energy challenge is very complex. It's interrelated with other challenges in the settlement, and it's also it also impacts on other socioeconomic status of the household. Thirdly, we found that the problems in the settlement are very much connected to the rest of the city. As I said, this wiring is connecting people to the grid, which means that the electricity provider is not collecting revenue from these connections. However, as you may well know from your economics, the provider passes on these losses to the rest of its consumers. So in essence, all of us are paying in one way or another for these informal connections. And so we found it very necessary to use a stakeholder engagement approach. And we were therefore not seeing ourselves as designers or as providers of the solution. We were simply there to create a space where different stakeholders can collaborate. So in the Codec project, we actually carried out design thinking workshops and policy seminars where we brought together policy actors, experts, private sector stakeholders to work together with the residents in the settlement. In many cases, this was the first time this type of diverse group of people was coming together to solve a complex issue. From that success, we were able to secure further funding. And right now we are carrying out what we are calling the GENS project. And GENS stands for Mainstreaming Gender for Energy Security in Poor Urban Environments. I was actually involved in writing that title, but I somehow never remember it. It's quite long. So just remember GENS. So in GENS, we are now collaborating as the University of Nairobi, Stellenbosch University in South Africa, our previous partners. And now we have a new partnership with Brunel University, London. So as a consortium, our aim is to institute the core design processes that we had already initiated in the Codec project. And so in GENS, we really want to enhance the collaborative activities that we had already started carrying out. And to do that, we are proposing to institute 2 living labs. So these living labs are going to be in Mathare Informal Settlement in Nairobi, Kenya, and in an informal settlement in Cape Town, South Africa. So we see these living labs as a long-term opportunity for stakeholders to continue working together. And of course, we're going to continue with our design thinking mindset. So we're going to have a lot of solution prototyping, user observation, behavior change and monitoring, hackathons, startup incubations, and it's going to be a great space to also work with students. As much as possible, of course, we're going to continue providing a robust scientific framework for the work that we do. And for that, we are already carrying out household surveys and ethnographic studies in the 2 settlements rather. Of course, our end game is to influence policy in these 2 countries and in Africa in general, because we want to see long-term change that improves the lives of people working in informal settlements. And the reason we are very concerned about informal settlements in our cities is because 60% of our population lives in these settlements. So most people in Nairobi or even in many other African cities like Lagos or Kinshasa are actually informal settlement dwellers. And therefore we hope that the solutions that we'll generate from these living labs are going to influence the work that is happening across the continent. As I said, we work with students, and right now in GENS, we have engineering students, design, policy, finance, and other students who use this as an opportunity to learn by doing. So as they provide different perspectives to our research, they're also learning how to collaborate and provide relevant solutions to the context that they themselves live in. Back in Nairobi, at the university, I'm also the postgraduate coordinator at the design school. And so last year, we put our heads together with Karina Fassbender, who's a design thinking expert based in Nairobi, but she's also an alumni of the Sugar Network. And our aim was to start a local Sugar Network thing going. And we were very lucky that the students received it very well. So for about 2 months, we had our postgraduate students deep diving into the design thinking process. And we were lucky to partner with a local organization that has a global presence. So this organization is known as Path International. And in Kenya and in the rest of the continent, they're doing a lot of work on frontline healthcare. So they provided our students with a design thinking challenge, and it was on how we might increase the motivation and engagement of frontline health workers at the student clinic. So this was a chance for our students to plug into the work of Path International when it comes to frontline healthcare work, but also to use a context that they understand very well. So they made several visits to our student clinic, and they did come up with some low fidelity prototypes that the designers at Path loved very much. So I'm happy to report that from that exercise, we actually managed to secure funding for a new design challenge with Path International. So what's going to happen this year, actually it's already started, is that we are going to have Path International providers with new design challenges, and our students are going to get involved in that for the next 3 months. Karina, as I've mentioned, is going to continue working with us, and my colleague, Dr. Betty Mwiti, is going to carry through with that program. And our hope is that when you have the global kickoff next year, we are actually going to attend, right? So we really do look forward to joining the Sugar Network, because it's going to be the first African university that joins the network. So that is very much a challenge for us, and of course for the network as well. So none of this work would be possible without funding and support, and I'd like to acknowledge the support I've received over the years to carry out this work. The CODE project that I talked about is supported by the LIRA 2030 program, and this is a program funded by CEDA, and its aim is to support early career researchers in Africa to carry out collaborative research. Out of about 30 grantees, I was the only designer. So this was a great chance for me to bring in my design thinking approach into a context where we are looking at multiple perspectives of solving problems in Africa. The GIANTS project is funded by the Newton Fund through the British Council and the National Research Fund of South Africa. Personally, I'm also involved in other collaborations. So I'm part of a consortium known as Next Africa, and our aim is to create a collaborative platform for innovation enthusiasts in Europe and Africa. And then I'm also what is called our Utopian, and Utopia is a design collaborative. Next week, I'm going to be presenting our work in Utopia at Design Africa. That blank box is for the Sugar Network logo. So I didn't want to put it there. I just want to leave it as a challenge for all of us that we should see the University of Nairobi joining the network formally, so that we can continue the great work that you have started. I'd like to finish by teaching you one last Swahili word, which is asanteni. And asanteni means thank you. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope I've initiated a process for us to see how we can co-design for extreme affordability, especially looking at Africa, because as we know, the future is African. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. This was insightful, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that you truly can be part of our global kickoff next year. I would like to give an opportunity for a question to somebody can also ask live. And if not, then oh, there is a question. Thank you. From Lamei Tang, very inspiring work. What is the biggest challenge you have encountered so far for your prototype to influence African policy?
Thank you. That's a great question. So when it comes to policy, we find that policymakers work in a very top-down approach. So we have some of the best policies, as we are told, in Kenya, but these policies don't take into account the needs of low-income communities, especially informal settlements. So, for example, when you look at the energy policy in Kenya, it makes no mention whatsoever of the needs of informal settlement dwellers, and yet 60% of people in urban areas are living in informal settlements. So our aim is to see how policy actors can start looking at the needs of people in informal settlements. And to do that, we are going to continue organizing these design thinking workshops and policy seminars where we get them to work together with the community. In November, we are actually going to have a session where I'm bringing about 20 people who work in different areas of energy policy to have a workshop in Mathare. For many of them, that's the first time they're going to be going into the informal settlement. But for us, we want it to be an opportunity for them to start thinking about very relevant policy changes that are going to improve the lives of people in the city. So that top-down approach is what we want to challenge, and we want to see how we can initiate a flattening of hierarchies and a space where people make it normal to find it normal to collaborate with diverse communities.
Great. Now we have another question from Sushi. Maya, do we have a minute for another question? Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, design usually targets products and services as an output. What are the similarities and differences for policy design, and how do you prototype and test a policy at a small scale?
Wow, that's a great question, but it's it's a tough question. I'm not sure I understand it. Like, yes, as designers, we understand how to design services and products, but then when it comes to influencing policies, we have to rethink how we work. Is that the question?
I'd say that's how I understand it too. So basically, there is a comparison between design for products and services and for policy design.
For policy. Well, I can give examples from my own experience. I had no background whatsoever in doing policy work until I realized in our work that we cannot live out policy. So by default, I had to start reading policy documents. And as you can imagine, for a designer, that's very boring work. So what we've done in our team is that we actually now have a student who has a policy background. She's a political scientist, and she's purely focusing on the policy issues that we need to address. So she's working very closely with the rest of the team, the designers, the engineers. And for me, I see that if I can facilitate that process of collaboration amongst experts, then we are going to start seeing the policy changes. So as we know, policy cycles are very long. So it takes about 5 years to influence policy. And so we want to engage in a long-term collaboration with policy actors. And right now we are part of a committee that is run by a policy advisory arm of the government. And by participating in that committee, we hope that we can have some long-term influence. So I would say that it's not something that can be done as easily as having a design sprint. It's a long-term engagement, and it takes quite a bit of commitment to understand how policy works and how we can influence it.
Great, thank you. I do think that the last point especially is very interesting. You said that the cycles take about 5 years, yes. And how one would prototype this on a small scale would be interesting challenge to tackle. But I would encourage everybody to stay in touch with you if you're open for that as well. Your LinkedIn profile was posted by Maya in the chat. Thank you once again for your keynote.